Let's continue on with our styling for this project by moving on to creating a custom range slider. At the moment, if we take a look at the project, at the stage what we're currently at, this just makes use of the browser default range, and it doesn't look too good or fit in with our current project. So let's talk about how we can create our own custom slider. First, we need to set the appearance of our current range sliders to be none to remove all of the default styling. Then we can go ahead and create our own with some custom CSS. However, the browser support is not perfect for some of the techniques which we're going to use, but we can get around this by using vendor prefixes. Adding a vendor prefix to a CSS property is a way to make use of certain CSS experimental properties and also properties which are not yet currently fully supported in particular browsers. If we scroll down, we'll see the main prefixes which we can use. The first one is WebKit, which applies to all of these browsers, such as Chrome and Safari. We then have the Moz prefix, which applies to Firefox browsers. We can also target older versions of Opera and also Internet Explorer 2, but for this particular project, I'm just going to focus on these first two. All we need to do is to find a certain CSS property, such as transition, and then add the Moz or WebKit prefix in front. Using these will then tell the browser that we are happy to use these and give these a try before they are fully implemented in the browser. So to do this, we need to target both of our inputs with the type of range. So first of all, we have this one just here. Let's add a class of range. And we can also do the same for our second range slider, which is just below. This means that our styling will apply to both of our range inputs. So let's start just below our total. We can select our range. And the first thing we need to do is to remove the default range slider. We can do this by setting appearance to be none. The appearance property is not yet fully supported in WebKit browsers, so we also need to add the WebKit prefix in front of this. If we now save this and go to our project, reload, we'll see that this has removed the progress bar from behind. We will also move on to styling this thumb slider very soon, but for now we're just going to concentrate on the actual slider. So first of all, we can set the width to be 100%. So this is the full width of our container. The height of 8 pixels. And we can also set the background color of our slider. I'm going to make this light gray, which is the value of EEE. And we can begin to see our slider is now taking shape. Let's now add some margin to the very top to give it some spacing from the text, and also a border radius. So first of all, the margin on the top of 1.2 rems, and also a border radius of 0.3. The next thing we can target when this is active or clicked on is the border color which goes around the outside. We can select this with the outline color and change the default value to be any color which we like. I'm going to go for a matching value which we used in the linear gradient, so 5B, CE, AE. Refresh, and now if we click on any of these sliders, we now see this green color. The next step is to target this little circle which is called the slider thumb. We can again do this in the CSS. So let's target our range section. And then if we use the double colons just like this, this is a pseudo element. A pseudo element will allow us to target a particular part of an element. So for example, if we were targeting a paragraph of text, we would have pseudo elements available to select the first letter or even the first line. But since we're working with our range, we're going to target the slider thumb. Specifically, we're going to target the WebKit versions. So this will be for Chrome and Safari browsers. And the value which we need is slider thumb. We'll also target the Firefox browser in just a moment. So just like we did with the range, we're going to set the appearance to be none. We then need to set the width and height of our little thumb slider. So let's go for the width, 2.2 rems. The height, which is also going to be the same. If we set the border radius to be 50%, this will make it the full circle. Let's take a look at this. We don't see it just yet because we need to also assign a background color. And I'm also going to set this to be a color which we used before in the gradient. We now see our thumb slider. And the last thing I'm going to do is to change the cursor to be a pointer. And there we go. Next, let's see how this looks inside of a different browser. I'm going to go for Firefox. But of course, you don't need to follow along with this step if you don't want to. So inside the tip calculator, let's open up the index.html. We see that at present, we just have the default styling for the background. We don't see the thumb styling just yet. So let's fix this by creating a section for the Moz range thumb. Currently, we're only targeting the WebKit version. So let's copy this and paste this in below. And then inside here, rather than having the WebKit version, which changes to be the Moz prefix, and rather than slider thumb, this is called the range thumb. Save this and reload the Firefox browser, and we now see the thumb has been changed. So a couple of things to note here. We see there's a border around the thumb inside this browser. So we can set the border to be none. This will then remove this. We also don't need to include the WebKit appearance of none for this browser. But one thing we can improve on when we click and make this active is this dotted line around the outside. The way to do this inside of Firefox is by targeting the range slider. Again, use the double colons for the pseudo element. And the element which we want to target is going to be Moz. So use the Moz prefix for the Firefox browser. And then the name of the element causing this is the focus outer. We can set the border to be a value of 0. Refresh, and this has now been removed. So these browser prefixes are something to be careful of when working with multiple browsers, and also anything which is not yet fully supported. So this is our custom range slider now complete. Just one thing to quickly note when we scroll back up to the range section. Here we are targeting the appearance for only the WebKit browsers. You may be wondering why we haven't targeted the Mozilla versions too. Well, this is because for this particular appearance property, Firefox browsers will also respect the WebKit versions too, and this is for compatibility reasons. The last piece of styling I'm going to apply, so let's close this Firefox browser, is going to be to apply some Google fonts. So let's do a search for Google fonts and head over to fonts.google.com. I'm going to use a font called Roboto, so let's do a search for this. And this is the one we need just here. To include this into our project, we can select the font weight, and also if we want an italic version too. I'm going to go for the light 300 version, the medium, and also a bold version too. To include this, we need to click on the embed link, copy the link to the style sheet. This goes into our index.html. So paste this inside of the head section just above our custom style sheet. Save this file, and the next thing to do is to also set the font family inside of our style sheet. So copy the font family property, open up our styles.css, and we can apply this for all of our project inside the root HTML element. Refresh the browser. Our font has now taken effect. We can also set the default font weight. I'm going to go for 300. So now our styling looks a lot more like the finished version. Just to finish this project styling off, it's pretty hard to tell from our input just here because the fonts are not too dissimilar, but by default an input won't inherit the font family. To do this, we need to scroll down to our input, the type of number. We can either set the font family just like above, or we can set this to be inherit. Reload the browser and this will now take effect. So this is now the end of the styling section for our tip calculator. And next we're going to move on to make this function by using JavaScript.